Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. Got a lot of things we're going to go over here, but trying to start off with, the strategic performance. And one of the things I've been trying to do as elected prosecutor is this community outreach. And I've got some photos here when, obviously before COVID hit, that was one of the things we were really trying to do, because every time you meet a prosecutor, the first words out of somebody's mouth is, "Oh, I didn't do it," or "I don't want to meet you," because I think everybody's got the idea that our sole purpose is to send people to prison. And that's what we're here for. And it's really not. We were here to keep the Kent County safe and really work with the community to prevent crime if at all possible. So I think community outreach is something we really tried to do. So these are some examples of things we did. Monica and I on the left here on mine, we got our pinwheels for prevention. There's a child abuse pinwheels for prevention. You get involved in those and put it out on Facebook and try and engage the community that way. The bottom right, Michelle Smith Lowe is my senior attorney in the family division. She won a Giants Award. And so we got the members of the office to go out and participate in the Giants Award when she received that very prestigious award for her involvement and her work in the African-American community. Then the Human Trafficking Task Force, the top one, going on panels and talking about these things and trying to engage. We do Rock the Block. We go out and get involved in the community to try and change the perception of what prosecutors are and what prosecutors do on a regular basis, because I think that there's just a misnomer of what our office is all about. And so, that's not necessarily something you can measure or something you can really put a number on, but that's something we really tried to focus on before the pandemic. And as we come out of it, I think we're going to try and do it as well. We've already done a few things at the Hispanic Center, trying to outreach the Hispanic community, because there's a hesitancy to come forward and report crime because they're worried about what's going to happen to them. And so trying to engage these communities and vulnerable communities too is something I'm really trying to work on. But when we look at, I tried to pattern this after some of your strategic plan that you put out last year and focus on two specific ones here. And the first one is priority 3. When you look at maximize efficiency and provide exceptional service, I thought that was the thing that jumped out to me when thinking about what this office does. And I say that because I'm going to put up a number here. This is the Prosecuting Attorneys Association of Michigan sends us a survey just about every year. And they ask us just basic numbers, how many prosecutors you have and so forth. And you can see the reports. Now, for whatever reason, Wayne's usually a part of it. Oakland seceded from Pam years ago. I don't know why the prosecutor there didn't like what was going on or something. Wayne's usually there, but we at least have numbers of our comparable counties. You look at Macomb, Kent, Genesee, Washtenaw, and it shows population. Macomb is about 842,000. They have 56 prosecutors. Jumping down to Genesee, the next one below us, 422,000 population ballpark, and they have actually more prosecutors than we do, 36. We're at about 35. So what does that mean when I start to break this down? When you look at it, just at a pure, one prosecutor per how many residents, Kent is about 16,000, almost 17,000 people are represented by a prosecutor, which if you look at the comparable counties in the state of Michigan, we're well above everybody. Macomb's the next closest at about 14,000. So you talk about efficiency of service. I think we're delivering services efficiently. You're getting a good amount for the money you're spending on our prosecutors. But I want to dig a little bit deeper, and I bring up Michigan Indigent Defense. And indigent defense is something that we support as prosecutors, surprisingly, because we want a competent defense attorney. We want people to be represented. Our job, once again, is not to put people in prison. We want to make sure people are represented fairly. The defendant gets a fair trial, but we're zealously representing the victims. Well, indigent defense has got a ton of money from the state. And I know most of the county commissioners have been involved in that. And we're not saying anything against that. And I know Craig Paul has worked very hard on that. But if you look at that number down there in red, the indigent defense should not exceed the caseload numbers, 150 felonies or 400 traffic misdemeanors per year. That's what they're saying for indigent people who are representing those who can't afford their own attorney. Well, what does that mean for us? Okay, let's take a look at Kent County. When you break down my office, we have 21 criminal APAs. I have an office about 35, but 21 are specifically working in criminal. Last year, we just got these numbers in. We issued about 10,500 cases, right? That doesn't take into account, we're the gatekeeper. So we deny about 4,000 cases a year. So we, defense attorneys, kind of take what we give them, because if we don't charge, they're usually not getting involved too much. So we're screening those. So we're about, 14,000, 15,000 cases we're looking at a year. We charge 10,000. When you break that down, that's 500 cases a prosecutor. Okay, we're well above what that indigent defense level is. Now, is that exactly a true number? Does every 21 prosecutors have 500 cases? No, because what happens is right now in my district courts, where district courts are handling your misdemeanors, for example, 61st has 6 judges. Well, I have 2 prosecutors assigned to 6 judges. Now that's a lot of work, and but those misdemeanor cases are also less involved. A drunk driving trial may have 3 witnesses. They don't take the same amount as felonies. So that number is, boosted up. But if you look at my circuit court attorneys, circuit court are dealing with the felony cases. They're averaging anywhere between 180 and 210 cases, felony caseload. That's a good amount. That's a lot of work, and that's above what, you almost see what they're recommending for indigent defense. You look at my juvenile division, when you look at those numbers, 1,600 delinquency cases. Delinquency cases are juveniles committing crimes. All right. So, but for the fact they're not old enough to be charging as adults, but also a part of that, we have a contract with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services to handle neglect cases, parental termination. We may terminate parental rights. We are involved in making sure kids are staying safe. We have about another 1,000 cases of those. So my juvenile are handling about 377 cases per assistant prosecutor. That's a tremendous caseload across the board. And those are very difficult cases. When you're talking about terminating parental rights, that's as serious, if not more serious, than what goes on in the criminal division. My family law. A lot of people don't necessarily realize our family law division is responsible for child support, establishing paternity, and then getting child support orders set up to pass along to front of the court. Well, 4 prosecutors handling 2,000 cases, over 2,000 cases, that's about almost 600 cases per prosecutor over there working in the child support division. And then finally, I guess, I kind of joke with Jim Benison, the head of my division there, my appeals people, well, they're the slackers. They're only handling about 127 cases. But in that instance, 508 cases, the appeals have a tremendous, it's almost more involved because they're handling, somebody gets convicted, a 5-day trial could have transcripts for, 6,000 pages, and they got to read those transcripts and then write a brief to the, Supreme Court, Court of Appeals. So that's an amazing amount of involved work. So when you look at efficiency of delivery, I think you're getting a lot of work out of these prosecutors. And please don't take this as I'm not begging for more prosecutors. That's not going to be the pitch at the end here. Okay. I think we're doing a good job. We have a very experienced office. We're able to stay on top of these cases, and they know what they're doing. They're very dedicated to their job. So we are handling things, and we are providing good service. And these are some of the extras, if you will. So we charge all those cases. When you look at the treatment courts, and once again, we're very supportive of our treatment courts, and these are the treatment courts we have across the county. But we have to assign a prosecutor to be. Every treatment court model says a prosecutor's got to be involved. They're a gatekeeper, if you will, and then they also have to weigh in on what we should do when these people get in. So you look at, there's 2 sobriety courts, a drug court, a veterans court, the mental health treatment court. We started the YSOTP court. Now, I think you guys just approved funding from the state, kind of a pass-through. We got a grant thanks to Representative LeGrand. That is, that's a new thing. Nobody's doing that in the state, YSOTP. But these are extra things that we're doing on top of approving warrants, on top of the handling of those 10,000 cases that we've got to go and devote time and energy and effort to participate in those courts. And I know one of the big things from funding wise from PAM, the Prosecuting Attorneys Association, is courts get funding, prosecutors don't get funding, and we're just as important and just as participant in those treatment courts. And so that's one of the things, we're looking at from a statewide issue, is trying to get prosecutors funding for participating in these treatment courts, because they are very important, and we're looking to expand them and work on them. But we also need the funding to be able to participate in them, because they're a tremendous burden, if you will, to an office and the manpower. So in terms of, you can be efficient as you want, but if you're not responsive to what's going on, that doesn't help really, right? So I take this year obviously was a crazy year with COVID. And I bring this is one, cell phone stores. If you look at these dates here that I have here, May and June were absolutely the nuttiest thing I've ever seen as a prosecutor in terms of cell phone store break-ins and cars. And we had to respond to that. And this is one car, and you see there's 8 instances of this one car. We'll multiply that by 15 similar cars. And the next slide shows you this. This is, the month of June. 40 stolen vehicles from all over, not, Grand Rapids, Wyoming. We had a summit, if you will, between, it was Mecosta County, Ottawa County, Muskegon. It was, all across the state were convened at the sheriff's department here in Kent County because of the rash of car break-ins at dealerships and driving through car dealership windows to steal cars. And then they use those cars to commit cell phone store break-ins. So we were able to respond. I assigned, on top of everything else, got 2 prosecutors to kind of work on a task force to look at, okay, what are we going to do with these kids and adults? It was juveniles and adults. So that's why I had 2 prosecutors, one from our juvenile division, one from my adult criminal division, to try and coordinate how we respond with the other law enforcement agencies in Kent County and through the state. So to be able to respond to unique things, we never predicted this. And when you talk about performance measurements, I kind of push back when they came to us saying, okay, this is our goal. We can't have a goal. We're going to write 6,000 warrants or 10,000 warrants, because it's just like, a police officer you got to get a quota for tickets. We can't do that. We are bound by what's going to come to us, and nobody ever predicted anything like this. So we were able to respond even to these rather unique and challenging times to provide assistance to work on these cases. And it's not just car dealerships and stuff like that. They got, dangerous things. And if you remember, this was during right around the time of George Floyd and the protests as well. We were very concerned. So it wasn't just prosecuting. We can't prosecute our way out of this. And then you have these instances where somebody dies because of a car accident and somebody's fleeing the police. We were worried about there was going to be a shooting here in Kent County. So we convened, Commissioner Womack was one of the people that came in. We convened community leaders to talk about this and say, hey, we need to reach out to these kids and say, hey, we need to stop this. And it's gone down. I mean, it didn't go away completely, but it's a heck of a lot better now than it was, back in May and June. And we were able to react and provide good service and not only prosecute, we charge people, but also try and go out there and prevent it and trying to reach out to the community and say, hey, we need to do something better and do something more here. So the next priority, if you will, and it kind of ties into somewhat when you look at your strategic plan, is a high quality life that promotes safe and healthy communities. Well, safe and healthy communities is once again something I think we have an impact on. And unfortunately, this was a bad year. And to some extent, Grand Rapids is a focal point. And I happened to be in one of the, joined in the Zoom meeting where you had the West Michigan Sports Commission, give their presentation. I think there was a downtown development. Well, when, outside people are looking to come in and be a part of Kent County, maybe come here as part of a sporting event, this is what you kind of see sometimes. I did a number of interviews. Is Grand Rapids safe? And Grand Rapids is safe. We had a horrible year, but it wasn't just Grand Rapids. Wyoming, Kentwood, they saw their number of homicides go up this year. So once again, we have to react, because keeping a safe community is something that's of utmost importance to how this community is viewed and how the economic development goes as well. So just looking at Grand Rapids alone from 2020, there's 11 that remain unsolved, okay? But out of those, we didn't charge, because almost the scarier thing is 5 of those were self-defense in terms of, we reviewed them and said, we can't charge because somebody started shooting, the other person shot back and killed them. That's self-defense. That just shows you kind of some of the guns that are out there, which is a little bit concerning. But from that, 21 criminal APAs, 17 of them have at least 1 homicide charge right now. And homicides are very work intensive. And most of them have multiple homicides. I mean, more than one. So that's a heavy burden on what they're doing. And when I talk about 13 in the investigative subpoena stage, a lot of those that we solved in the investigative subpoena stage are work intensive. And that's a different procedure. It used to be, kind of in the old days, police investigated, they present the case to the prosecutor's office, and we decided to issue or not issue. Well, there's obviously some tension between, people don't want to cooperate with the police. So we're forced to issue what's called an investigative subpoena, where we subpoena people in, bring them into court, put them under oath. There's no judge, there's no jury. And then if they lie, we charge them with perjury. And then once they're charged with perjury, they all of a sudden become much more truthful, if you will. And we're building cases like that. We use them quite a bit in many of our homicides. It's very rare almost. We just had one yesterday. I charged one yesterday where we actually had the homicide happened on March 7th. We were able to write it March 8th because we had witnesses that talked to the police and told them what happened. And we were able to write it. That doesn't happen anymore. We're taking months, if not years, for investigation. So if you look at it, I think we had total charge. We've charged 38 homicides. Now, 38 homicides, that means we've gone back. We've charged some from 2019 because they've been in this investigative subpoena stage, bringing witnesses in for over a year. One of those was a fish ladder. There was the 4th of July, the fish ladder downtown. We charged that members out of that homicide this year because the investigation took so long. So it's very work intensive for this office, getting subpoenas out, scheduling court time on top of everything else that's going on. But it's very important because holding people accountable for crimes like this is tremendously important. And to mention that, this is probably maybe, to somewhat a feather in our cap, not our cap, but also the sheriff's department. This is a 2006 homicide. We charged it last year, so that goes part of the 38 homicide, but this was a 2006 homicide that we're finally able to crack last year using investigative subpoenas. Happened up in Rockford, but our office and the sheriff devoted a couple detectives. I had 2 prosecutors assigned to work on this cold case to be able to bring justice for somebody that was killed in 2006. And so stuff like that, being able to react and handle these types of cases, even with everything going on, I think is a tremendous benefit, and you're getting a lot of benefit from our assistant prosecutors in this type of stuff. But it's not just that, prosecuting is not all we do. Talking about what we're doing in juvenile, we're working right now with MDHHS, blind removal. There is an overrepresentation of kids of color being removed from their parents, and that's concerning. That's a major event to remove a kid, even for a short period. This is not talking about every termination. That's just removing them because there's issues in the home that and then trying to work back. And the vast majority of cases do able to put those kids back. But we took a look at, okay, what can we do differently? And we're doing a blind removal where they remove any sort of, whether it be, race characteristics, something that would tip off, and trying to look at that purely. Okay, are we making the right decision here? For what we're doing when we're removing these kids from a home because it's such a serious instance. Hillary Baker is one of my assistants over in Family Division. She was instrumental in trying to get Aquinas College to bring this child advocacy program, to train the next generation of CPS workers to get better responses, to make sure CPS, we can investigate to some say, but we rely on police, we rely on CPS investigators as well. So she brought in a program to really train and get involved to the new generation of CPS people so they are able to respond appropriately at moving down the road. And the juvenile mental health court, once again, working with the courts, we have a mental health court for adults, but they're doing the same thing for juveniles to get those juveniles the appropriate treatment to get them on the right track, especially in the juvenile. If we can get the juvenile on the right track, we don't see them as adults. We save prison costs, we save jail costs. We get that person to be a productive member of society. If the younger we can do it, the better it is. Going back to those the cell phone stores and the car thefts. We had kids 14 years old. There's a number of 14, 15-year-olds involved in multiple car thefts. I mean, they're starting behind. We can't let that happen. If we can get people mental health treatment and get them appropriate supports earlier, we don't see them as adults, because once you get to adults, it gets a lot worse and a lot harder to do. So that's what we're doing in the juvenile system. Our family law, once again, getting kids the proper support, getting them payment so they can buy food, they can go to school, they can do those things that are necessary. We are doing an excellent job over there. We get a case from the Office of Child Support within 14 days. 96% of those cases, we're starting them. We're opening a case, getting them moved on. All right. This is well above the federal guidelines. We have federal guidelines. I think the federal guidelines are around 75%. Locating, trying to find the non-custodial parent every 60 days. We're at 90% of the time. And that's an involved process, because we get some bad addresses from Office of Child Support. So we go out and we try and find them. We can't find them. That becomes incumbent upon us to try and, look at other, aid they're getting, credit cards, where their addresses. We got to try and find them to get them served, to get them in to try and establish paternity. And maybe the bottom line, the final orders entered. That means we've got both parents in. We've talked about to the dad saying how much I say dad, generally it's the dad that's a non-custodial parent, but not all the time. But hey, how much can you pay? What other obligations you have? We're getting orders established 87% of the cases that are the final orders. So those are well above the federal guidelines. So we're getting the kids the support they need to hopefully get a healthy start on life. And I think that's the most important thing. The future. That little guy down the bottom, that is us. The tidal wave is waiting for the courts to open up. We're somewhat terrified. We have not had a jury trial in Kent County since March of last year. Take that back, we had one. We had one district court case in Kent was able to go sometime around September. Other than that, all the cases have backed up. I did a kind of informal asking in my APAs, how many cases are we looking at that you're not just assigned, that are kind of waiting past settlement conference, haven't pled, and they said 900 or about 950 cases. And that, the 38 murders we've charged are just sitting there. we average about, it says, 55 to 75 trials a year. And you think, well, that's not that bad. But for every one of those trials that go, there's probably 5 that resolve. Without the jury trials, those trials have not resolved at all. They're just backing up. They're stacking up like cordwood. District courts are moving in terms of we're getting those homicides through the preliminary stages. We've been having court pretty much since, April, and moving cases through and getting preliminary hearings done, but trials are stacking up and defendants are not pleading because they think, well, we're going to get a better deal when this backlog is going to happen. And that's something I'm trying to say, no, I'm not going to, people are pleading, and why should we hold people differently here than the people who took advantage? So I'm telling my APAs, get your discovery out, give the best offers you can now, because it's going to be a backlog, but we want to, hold people accountable. So this is what we're looking at. And then we just ran our numbers, and this is not my best slide, but we just, you look at the difference. This was quite stunning to me, because essentially March through April, we were beyond skeleton. There was a couple people in here reviewing warrants, and nothing much was going on. We were seeing a ton of domestics. So to have 10,000 charges, see that sort of increase in terms of the authorized charges versus, last year was quite stunning. So all those cases, a lot of them were just backing up. So we're just waiting. We're looking at maybe May, June to start jury trials again, and how we're going to deal with that. We'll deal with it, but it's going to take some time. It's not like something we're going to solve by just having a bunch of trials in 2 weeks. It's going to take, over a year by best estimate. So that's kind of, my presentation. I hope you have any questions, and I'll be happy to answer them.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Let's see if we have any questions or comments from commissioners. I see Commissioner Ponstein has a question or comment.
Thank you, Prosecutor Becker, for being here today. Looks like your plate is plenty full. I just want to have you comment. You mentioned this in your opening remarks, and it seems to be a problem that's in the headlines all the time, and that's human trafficking. And people I talk to in the community, a lot of them think, well, that stuff doesn't happen here. That happens in the big cities there and here. Do we have a problem? Is it something that we need to be concerned about? Is it the fact that maybe people aren't aware that it is a problem? And what's even more disturbing is that, there is still a high demand for this type of issue in this country. It's just, heartbreaking.
It's a combination of a little bit of everything. Yeah, we do it. There is an issue. There is a problem, and we're very fortunate. We have Solutions to End Exploitation. It's an organization based in Grand Rapids that's very proactive, and they just got a grant from the federal government to start working with Kent ISD to raise awareness, kind of like going to people aren't aware of it, to train the school workers, to raise awareness with the kids about some of the keys. But it's we don't have that many cases. We don't charge cases because they don't come forward. I was saying, you discover a human trafficking case, and we had one this year out of Grand Rapids. They came across it. They got a report of a house. All the classic things. There was multiple women staying there. Condoms all over the place. One of the girls escaped, called the police on the run, and reported it. We were able to charge, but we could never get that girl back to testify. Everybody fled because you have an aspect of domestic violence, because a lot of these girls are vulnerable girls who are being trafficked, and they view their trafficker as somebody they love, who cares for them, who they want to support, and they don't want to prosecute them. They think they're their friend or their lover or whatever, and so they're a very difficult nut to crack. So when you look at the numbers, we don't charge a ton, but it's out there. How prevalent is always tough to measure too, because people aren't coming forward, and the victims don't think they're victims. So it's a very difficult case, but it definitely happens in Grand Rapids, and we're working on it, and it's out there. So it's part raising awareness and part trying to break the cycle, much like domestic violence.
All right, Commissioner LeGrand.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that really interesting report. I kind of want to tie it back to the COVID money that we talked about earlier from our people in Washington. And I know, like, for example, with all these murders backed up, we have extra expenses at the jail because we've got a lot of people incarcerated. Do you see costs, like actual financial costs, for trying to work through this backlog going forward? Is that something that we're going to see costs involved with as we try to catch up from COVID?
That's a good question. We did get a lot of the CARES money earlier for computers and IT. And so that is an issue in terms of upgrading our stuff because, one of the things, not necessarily COVID related, but I know most of the, with the COVID money, we had a bunch of departments get body cams. I mean, the sheriff's department and everybody else, well, body cams, we've got to now access them, share them, and get involved much more in technology. We had Grand Rapids was like, one for the last 4 years, and boom, all of a sudden we got like 7. And trying to handle those evidence.com and having computers like this that can handle downloading and the stores and stuff like that we may use in cases down the road. So that could definitely be something, technology wise. Witnesses in and stuff like that, that's a good question. I'd have to take a look at and really see. And how long? I mean, I don't know when these cases are going to come to trial. That could be another 2 years down the road for some of these. So I would assume there would be costs. To quantify it, that's going to be more difficult.
One other question. How much, I know that partly this depends on funding, but if funding was out of the picture, would you see a lot of potential for the sort of the treatment courts to grow, or rather, how would you judge the potential? Could we do
Sure.
twice as much? I mean, what's your feeling?
That's more of a manpower issue too, just because, judges have only a certain amount of time. I know 63rd is talking about doing a drug court, so there's an expansion there. I think there's probably room for a mental health court. Just the Commissioner Stack, there's a misdemeanor. We've got a felony mental health court. Now we got a juvenile, but there's a lot of misdemeanors that come through that, we can't refer to mental health courts. So there is room. It's just, part of it's funding, but part of it is the manpower in terms of getting judges. And once again, then my prosecutors. So at some point in time, we may need funding for additional people. We've always talked about an IT person too, just going back to the body cam and stuff like that. IT does a nice job of support, but having someone in the office that can handle evidence.com and body cams, and we're going paperless. So Carpel, and that's a whole different issue. And that was through a capital fund through the commission. We're very appreciative, but there's going to be issues in terms of how we deal with that paperless function going through. So an IT person. So I could see more manpower down the road to help support all this.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yep. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? I don't see any. I did have a follow-up, Chris, with respect to that issue on the backup of the jury trials, which of course is being experienced in the civil side of that as well. But is that a noticeable increase in the number of individuals incarcerated? Because I assume that at least with respect to a number of the felony cases, these individuals may continue to be incarcerated at our jail pending those trials.
I don't think so. No. If you look, I ran the numbers lately, but last time I checked, we were about 800 in the jail, and we usually average about 1,000 to 1,100 because judges are making, they're trying to be COVID conscious as well in terms of setting bonds, which is somewhat concerning because that's, people are out that may have normally been in. I'm actually keeping a bond list of, cases. I had one guy, charged with drunk driving. He's a sub-4, so he's got 4 prior felonies, charged with drunk driving. He got a bond and was out, and guess what? Committed another drunk driving. So he's got drunk driving, 5 and 6 now, or whatever it is. So we're seeing people out on bond more that maybe would have been locked up for this because of COVID and because people are worried about the delays. So you probably talk to the sheriff a little bit more. Okay. Exact numbers. Last time I checked, our numbers were down in the Kent County Correctional Facility.
And once that backlog breaks, that is, the courts begin to actually schedule jury trials, I have to presume that your staff is going to be even busier because obviously
Yes.
A trial is a very time-consuming process.
Yeah, we're kind of there. We had a preliminary meetings with the circuit court, and right now we're kind of, I don't know if you remember back when I first started, we used to have they have a jury trial set for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you kind of have a rotating, and that got, was very inefficient, and you bring jurors in, they didn't like it. So we went back to just Monday. You pick, Monday's trial starts. They're talking about doing that again, going to the 3 days a week, just trying to move the cases, get through the backlog. And so that's, if 6 judges do it, there's 2 attorneys per judge. Meanwhile, we got to cover all the normal preliminary exams and so forth and warrants. We'll be stretched thin.
So speaking of stretching thin, one of the byproducts from my experience. When you ask attorneys to take too many cases, it can create a burnout factor. Have you experienced that at the prosecutor's office, or have you avoided that?
I really don't think so. I've actually brought some people in though. We've had some trainings in the past year, just before COVID, about turning mental health, just for that fact. I haven't seen it. I don't think so. We don't see a mass exodus. We're not seeing, our average is about 15 years, I think, for experience. So people are sticking around here. You see I was actually present at PAM because, we have a great retention. So if people were burning out, I think they'd be leaving, and I just haven't seen that yet. And I think we've got a pretty good office attitude. So, but it's something to keep an eye on, because just what you said, we don't know what's going to happen when this all breaks.
It's probably that fancy building we put you in over at 82 Ionia.
Exactly.
All right. Any other questions or comments for the prosecutor? I don't see any. So thank you so much for your report, Chris, and thank you for all your work, and pass our gratitude on to your entire staff.
Will do.